Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Question for the doctors listening to this week's episode. Are you comfortable discussing finances with your patients? And before you answer that, let's qualify a word in my question. Comfortable. How would we define that? How about free from stress, worry, or fear? And there are plenty of things that you are doing comfortably on a daily basis, maybe certain types of treatment, answering specific patient questions, whatever it might be. And you do these things easily without thinking about it. You don't have to psych yourself up to do them. All right, so let's go back to the question then. Do you feel comfortable in that way discussing treatment and financial arrangements with your patients, especially for more expensive or complex cases? Now, obviously, I can't hear your answer, but if I were to base your answer on what I see when I asked this question early on at one of our sales and communication seminars, I bet that many of you, maybe even the majority of you, are not completely comfortable having this discussion. Sure, some of you might do it, some don't, but it doesn't come easy. You don't really enjoy it. And look, I've done several episodes on this subject because I truly understand. But what should you do about it? Or do you really need to do anything about it? Is this something worth bothering with? Can't we just have the treatment coordinator do it? Well, if you own a practice, or if you're in any way involved in the treatment presentation process, for instance, an associate that diagnoses, sells, and does their own treatment, yes, you do need to be comfortable discussing fees and finances, at least if you want to be successful at it. And in some of the prior episodes where we've covered closing, patient financial arrangements, treatment presentations, I've discussed the how-tos, like the how do you do it, what steps do you take, but not the whys. And while the how-tos are important, if you don't know why you're doing something, you won't be able to think with it. For instance, you may tell your receptionist, well, answer your phone with a smile, right? You tell them that. So then, they don't do it one day, or they don't always do it, or they have kind of a fake smile on. They know that you've told them to do this, but they don't know why it's important. Now, if you told them why, listen, you're the first point of contact with anybody calling the practice. So you're the first impression. We could have a great practice, and if the person answering the phone gives people the wrong impression, they won't come in here. So it's important to me that, when you answer the phone, you're happy, you're friendly, you're welcoming, etc. That's why I say answer the phone with a smile. Well, now the person knows why you want them to do that. Do you see? So if someone knows why they're doing something, it makes it more probable that it's going to be implemented effectively. So with all of that in mind, I'm revisiting this subject in this episode, financial arrangements, discussing finances with patients. We're going to discuss both the how-tos and the whys behind how financial arrangements would ideally be handled. And from there, take a look at how to ensure they're done in such a way as to maximize treatment acceptance. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And why don't we start with the obvious elephant in the room? Financial discussions happen in your practice every day, but you, the doctor, may not be involved in these. That's why, again, you have a treatment coordinator, right? Or an office manager, financial coordinator, etc. And you'll notice I started out this episode by asking doctors, are you comfortable doing this? With the idea being that you should be. Well, why? Well, let's look at something for a second, and bear with me. It will all make sense in a second. If you were to hire a schedule coordinator, let's say, Jeff, what are you talking about? Just track with me here. Let's say you hired a scheduling coordinator. What deliverable would you expect from them? When I ask this question at a seminar, I normally hear, well, full schedule. What, with denture relines? No. You'd expect a full, productive, efficiently scheduled schedule done in accordance with your scheduling policy. And if they were doing a good job, you'd expect to see some growth. All right, so that's the deliverable. That's why, they're part of the team. They get a paycheck, they get bonuses, they get vacation, etc. That's what they're doing or giving you in return for what you're giving them. All right. So now let's look at you. Let's say you're the owner doctor. You wear a lot of different hats, but what are the three main hats that you wear? Well, you own a practice, so by default, you're an executive. Whether you like it or not, you're an executive. You're a doctor, and you're a salesperson. So let's look for the deliverable for each of these jobs. So what would we expect from an executive? You'd expect growth, success, profitability, good service, longevity, etc., right? What do we expect from a doctor? Well, healthy patients, well done treatment and diagnosis, fixed function, health and aesthetic, properly done procedures meeting or exceeding the standard of care. You hired an associate, that's what you would want from them. Well, how about sales? If you hired somebody to do sales, what would you expect? Closes or sales? That's what you'd get. You'd expect people to sell stuff. In your case, sell needed treatment. And salespeople discuss finances. Imagine going to, you go to Best Buy, first place I could think of here. You go to Best Buy and you're looking at a TV or a washer and dryer or something, and you're talking to the salesperson. And you go, well, how much is this washer and dryer? And they go, that's a good question. They don't let me talk about finances with people here. You see that person at the cash register? Why don't you go ask them? That would just be ridiculous, right? Well, no, a salesperson is supposed to talk finance. And even beyond that, not only are they supposed to handle the financial aspects of it, which is why we have a treatment coordinator to help us with that, but ultimately you're responsible, Doc. But what is the actual delivery I'd expect from a salesperson is I would expect that whatever they sold, the person is now started to consume. In other words, if someone sells the MGE New Patient Workshop here, which you should definitely check out if you want more new patients. This is my shameless plug. You like how I just wove that in there? Anyway, I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. But if one of my team here sells the New Patient Workshop to you, their job isn't done until you start the New Patient Workshop. Then they did their job. Because if they just had you pay for it, they really haven't. You could just turn around the next week and say you don't want to do it anymore. They have to make sure you start. That's their job. So you have your doctor hat where you're treating patients. You have your exec hat where you're running the practice or running your manager who's running the practice. Then you have your sales hat where you're selling needed treatment and making sure the patient actually gets on the schedule to start it. Those are the three different deliverables that we would expect. So whether you like it or not, as an owner doctor or as an associate who presents treatment, this is a vital part of your hat, this financial aspect of it. And, you may go, well, I hate talking about it. I'm bad at it. I don't feel comfortable or whatever. What would you say if you hired somebody and they didn't want to wear parts of their hat? Think about that for a second. You have a hygienist, and what you want your hygienist to do when they see a new patient is you want them to do the basic diagnostic imaging, whether that's a full mouth or a cone beam, and you maybe want them to do a scan of some kind, and you want them to do perioprobing, and various things that you want them to do before you walk in the room to do the examination. This is what you expect from your hygienist. And they go, well, doctor, I really don't like probing. I don't feel comfortable, doing it. I don't like it. Do you just let them not do it and you do it yourself? Or if you had a schedule coordinator who didn't like calling people, I've actually seen this before, believe it or not. Well, that's kind of part of the job. Well, similarly, you can't half wear a hat. You can't just do part of the job. You have to be able to do the full job. Now, of course, as you grow, this could modify. You might get busier and busier, and then you get to a point where you got a higher volume practice. You're very good at closing. You've got some killer treatment coordinators who are really good at closing. You might turn over a little quicker to that treatment coordinator than you used to in the beginning because they've got it and they're going to close most of what you give them. But the point being is if you know what you're doing, if they run into any trouble, you can jump right in that room and debug it and handle that patient. Do you see? So part of closing is discussing finances and money, and it's something that you need to be able to do. You need to at least be comfortable doing it if ideally you're actually good at it. All right, so let's examine this fully as you apply it to a treatment presentation. So the first thing I would take a look at is, when you're doing a treatment presentation, and I've done a number of episodes on this, so I'm not going to rehash it, you have to make sure that you have time to do that treatment presentation. I've talked about this before where we allocate time for diagnosis and treatment. We don't allocate time for treatment presentations, and they take time. If you're presenting, a $6,000 case, which may not be that much to you, but the person makes $60,000 a year, and you're going to try and do that in 2 minutes, well, you're asking this person for 1/10 of their yearly salary in 2 minutes. You might need more time. It might take you 20 minutes to do it. So you have to make sure that there's time baked into the schedule to do that. Again, for specifics on that, I have a couple episodes you can check out, episode 27 and episode 124. If you want to, those both have data on how to set yourself up so that you have time to actually present. Next issue is, when are we discussing finances in a treatment presentation? Or are we waiting for the patient to ask? Well, there's really no right or wrong time to bring up finances. I have some clients that bring it up right in the beginning. I have others that bring it up at the end after they've explained the treatment. If you ask for my personal preference, I would probably bring it up at the end. That's just me, because if I bring it up in the beginning, then I have to kind of explain why it costs so much, and they might be freaking out about how much it costs. Anyway, so there's no right or wrong time as to when to bring it up. Do what works for you, right? You might start talking, and the patient brings it up after 2 or 3 minutes. When you're getting into what you found in diagnosis, they go, "Doctor, how much is this going to cost?" You can handle that at that point. You might say, "Totally happy to cover that with you. Let me just finish explaining what's going on here." But again, this is where you have to kind of use your noggin, right? If I'm talking to somebody and they ask me how much something's going to cost, and I can see that they're concerned about it, and that's all they're preoccupied with, they're not going to hear anything I say anyway, so I may have to tell them and then go through, "Oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. I totally get it. Look, can you put that to the side for a second? Let's at least see why it costs what it costs. Let me go through what's going on with you." Whatever. But most likely you're going to want to bring it up towards the end. Ideally, your treatment coordinator is there with you, and both you and your treatment coordinator should be fully familiar with the different ways that patients are going to pay. If you're using different types of third-party patient financing, you should understand each plan, what the base credit profile is for that they're looking for. Some are really good, but they require a higher credit score. Some have different terms. What's the base? Just get a general idea of what's good and what's bad. So this person, it's a $5,000 treatment plan. They're going to pay it off in a year. They should probably go with this company. Their credit score is 680. Boom, this is probably the best place to go, right? I'm a big fan of having multiple ways to pay. So let's say we're discussing the finances at the end. Let's say you particularly like that, which makes sense. So what are you going to do? You're going to cover what you found, why it's a problem, what you want to do about it, and why you don't want to wait. You're going to answer any questions as you go, and you're going to discuss it in such a way that the patient can actually understand what you're saying. You're not using a lot of heavy technical terminology unless you have to, and if you do, define any words or terms that you use and make sure the patient understands it. You want to explain this until the patient has full understanding of all of these factors. And again, not to push too many prior episodes, if you missed episode 233, the 4 steps of selling, this gives you a very specific way to structure the presentation. Anyway, once the patient gets it, you can see that they get it, you're done explaining what it is and what you want to do. I'd ask them, do you want to do this treatment plan? All right. Now, why? Because I'm sort of gauging, before I get into finances, why am I going to talk about paying for something that they don't want to do? That doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me. If I'm a server in a restaurant and I ask if you want a specific appetizer and you go, "No, I don't want that." Not that I'm trying to compare healthcare to food service, but if I ask you that and you know I don't want it, and I go, "But look, it's only $5. You should really," why would we do that? That would just be dumb. You don't want it. If the patient doesn't want it, well, then I got to go back and explain it again or figure out why they don't want it. Or they may say, "Sure," or, "Well, it depends on how long it's going to take or how much it costs," or they're going to have any different number of answers, all right? So again, if it's a no, or there's any type of, they're tepid in their response, they're not a full yes or sure, or, "Well, depends on how much it costs," or whatever, but they want to do it. So if it's a no or any type of a tepid type response, I'm going to go back into figuring out why they feel that way, right? Like, why don't you want to do it? Handle that, maybe re-explain something or whatever. If it's a sure or, "Okay, good, yeah, I want to do it, but I'm concerned about how much it costs," fine, whatever. Now I'm going to bring up the cost. So how am I going to bring up this cost? Well, there's really nothing fancy here. I'm just going to tell them how much it is. It's not that fancy. You could do it any way you want. I wouldn't write it on a piece of paper and turn it over. We're not in the movies. I wouldn't, personally, I would say it. You can have it in writing. You might have it on a tablet or a piece of paper, but I would verbally say it. That's just me, okay? And it might be, "Well, this treatment plan is $15,000. We're expecting your insurance to pay $1,500, which would leave your portion at $13,500. Now, once I've said that, it's going to elicit any number of different types of reactions. Rarely, not rarely, sometimes you'll get a patient who says, "Oh, okay, I thought it was going to be more." Those are like the unicorns, right? Most of the time, what are you going to hear? "I don't know if I can afford that. That's really expensive. My gosh, I couldn't believe it. Really, it's that much?" Or whatever. You're going to get whatever you get, right? With larger treatment plans, most of the time you're going to get a reaction, "I can't afford that," or "Oh my gosh, that's a lot," blah, 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 right? So assuming they want to do that, the patient has just said, my gosh, it's really expensive. I don't know how I'd pay for that. What would you ask them next? Well, first, acknowledge that I understand. And then just tell them, well, how would you normally take care of something like this? Now, why am I asking that question? Why am I asking the patient, how would you normally take care of something like this? I want you to notice that I'm inviting their participation in this. Because the usual reaction, when somebody says, oh my gosh, that's a lot, I don't know if I can afford it, blah, 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 they have a problem, right? The usual reaction, especially in a lot of practices, is the treatment coordinator or the doctor will say, oh, well, it's not a problem. We have all kinds of patient financing. You can stretch this out over X amount of years and blah, 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 blah. We're right into solving their problem for them. Now, the reason that's an issue is, and I hate to throw this word problem around too much, but let's think about this for a second. Here's a person sitting in front of you. They've had various dental issues that they haven't taken care of, and they now have decay and active disease or whatever is going on. And it's going to cost them $15,000 to fix it. Well, $13,500 after their insurance hopefully pays the $1,500. Whose problem is that really? Who does that problem belong to? Well, it belongs to the patient. And I'm not saying that in a negative or a callous way. That is an issue that they're going to have to confront and deal with. That is really not your problem. It's your patient. You want to help them. But they could walk out of there and go to the dentist down the street and life will go on for you. This is a problem they have. They have to participate in solving this problem. It can't be you're going to handle it all for them. They have to have some input. Because if you don't allow them to have input, you're kind of taking away their responsibility to a degree. And I don't recommend this. So when you ask them, how would you normally take care of this? Again, they may go, oh my gosh, I've never had to pay something so big, or I don't know. Or you might get, well, do you do payment plans, or could I put it on a credit card? Like they'll start offering up ways of fixing it. Let's say you had a schedule coordinator and you had a 4-hour opening in the schedule. You could walk up there and tell them all the things they could do to fill it, or you might ask them, well, what are you going to do about this? How are you going to solve this? And they might go, well, I could pull the person from tomorrow to today. Good idea. Have them participate with you. All right? Have them participate with you. The side benefit of this is in a lot of cases when the patient says, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. This is a lot of money. And then you throw out, well, we can do this payment plan or that payment plan or this, that, or the other thing. You're immediately moving the patient to third-party patient financing, which I don't have a problem with. I've used that word problem a lot. But those things cost a lot of money. You might be paying 7, 10, 15% for your money. So it's, they're going to be financing $13,500. If you're paying 10% of that, that's $1,300. Or if it's 15%, you're paying almost $2,000. If you ask them, they may tell you, well, I could put it on a credit card. That's going to cost you 3%. I'd much rather do that. Maybe I'm silly that way, but the idea is have them participate. And assuming they've worked out how they're going to pay, well, I want to put it on a credit card, or I want to do this, or I want to use one of your patient financing plans or something like this, then you send them off with the treatment coordinator to go sort it out, right? Now, you want to make sure that this thing is going to close. So you don't want to turn it over until you're certain, okay, good, I've done everything that I need to do, and I'm confident that when they go off with the treatment coordinator, this isn't going to be a problem. Does it mean that there's not going to be a problem? Absolutely not. You've probably had cases where patient says, great, I'll do it this way. They go off with the treatment coordinator says, great, let's figure this out. And they go, I'm not doing this. Well, okay, in those cases, you get called back in, right? Or the patient's supposed to do 6 crowns or 8 crowns or 4 crowns, and they only want to do 2 because that's what insurance covers this year, right? So again, you have to be called back in for that without destroying your schedule for the day. If it's something like you've just started a root canal and the patient's going to have to wait 45 minutes, you might call them, or see them. You could bring them back, or you can just call them that night and talk to them about it. You're not going to close everything is the bottom line. But if while you're talking to them about finances, it becomes a back and forth about money, like we're sticking on the money too much. It's all about, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, that's too much, and blah, 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 blah. To me, that usually indicates that the patient has still not decided to actually do it. Because when someone's motivated, they're looking for a way to solve the problem, right? They're actively looking for a solution. So then I would go back to look, do you really want to do this? And they go, well, Maybe. Well, then your problem isn't the finances at that point. It's that the person doesn't want to do the treatment plan. All right. So otherwise, assuming it's all good, goes off the treatment coordinator, patient's wrapped up, pays, works out how they're going to do finances, and ends up on your schedule. That's the simplicity of this process. Obviously, there's different types of objections you're going to run into and things of that nature, but the objections have nothing really to do with the money because, well, they could. But here's the thing. The number of patients who are going to come in your practice who literally just could not pay, the percentage is way smaller than you think it is. It's way smaller than you think it is. If you think that 40, 50% of your patients just can't afford your treatment, it's a lot lower than that. That's just the excuses you're getting, the sales resistance you're getting that you're buying. It's actually not, for real what's actually going on. They just don't want to do the treatment plan. You've sat here and explained something to me for 20 minutes. I don't really see the value in it. I don't know why this is going to, and then you tell me it's 15 grand. I don't want to pay that. So I'm going to make up all kinds of reasons. Well, I'm really busy. I can't afford it. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I need to think about it. Why? We shouldn't be discussing finances at that point. Finances is not an issue. I don't even want to do the treatment. So then you need to figure out why I don't want to do the treatment at that point. All right? And like I said, that 4 Steps to Selling episode gets into that specifically. So I definitely check that out. All right. So now, couple last, 7 last points. These are frequently asked questions I get on this. And this brings up this point I was just discussing. What if the person legitimately cannot afford it? Number one, how would you know? I mean, you can't know for sure. You're not going to run a credit report and, show me your checkbook. You're not going to do all that stuff. In my experience, if I know it's truly a financial barrier, the person is more communicative about it. So it'll be, look, I would love to do this. I just really can't afford it. I've got maybe $1,000 available on this credit card. Maybe I have $2,000 in my checkbook. I could probably pay $1,000, but there's no way I could pay. Let's say the treatment plan is now $15,000. There's no way I could pay $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever. My credit's not good. You're gonna see the person somewhat communicative about the situation, and they're still looking for a solution. But again, that percentage of patients is going to be a lot smaller. People who validly just can't figure out a way to do it. And in those cases, that's where you have to use your clinical judgment and decide how you want to approach the case. That's when you might phase cases or do what you feel needs to be done now, et cetera, if that's possible. All right. And then what if you have a bunch of patients you just can't get approved? Kind of falls into the last thing. You have to take a look at, well, what can we do? This is, again, up to you clinically. I'm not a doctor. I can't weigh in on this. You have to look at clinically what you have to do now. Maybe it's just so massive that it really isn't a good fit for your practice, in which case you can use some type of a public solution at that point. It really depends, right? When I go over this with docs, some of them ask, well, won't patients think if I discuss fees that I'm just after their money? Some people will, but the majority won't. And some people, they'll stick out like sore thumbs. These are probably the patients that you get sick when you see them on your schedule, okay? Some people will give you a real hard time for discussing fees. I'm not talking about someone just getting upset, because you'll notice this. Some people, when you bring up the subject of money, they change. And if you don't believe this, talk to your treatment coordinator. They've seen patients who seem completely normal, and then they bring up fees, and then they just turn into a completely different person. It's like the Exorcist or something like this, right? Well, money can be very passionate, right? Wars are fought over it. Marriages break up over it. So to me, someone being passionate about how much something costs, maybe they're upset, maybe they're a bit bummed, that to me isn't somebody giving me a hard time about it. That's just something they're going through. Someone who's making me wrong, well, gee, doc, I think you just have dollar signs in your eyes. I probably just wouldn't want to treat that person. I leave that up to you. But if someone really believes that, or is impugning your character or telling you that you're not trustworthy, why do you want to work on that person? But again, that's up to you. Obviously, if you don't want to treat somebody, you got to follow your Dental Practice Act and things like this. Next question is, what if you just can't deal with discussing money? You almost get sick to your stomach when you talk about it. Well, in that case, what I would do is I would practice. You can practice in the mirror. You can practice with your OM or your dental assistant and do it until you feel at least quasi-comfortable with it, and then go do it with patients. You'll start to see that you feel a little bit better, and eventually you build it. You see that not everybody's you're not going to tell them, oh, it's $5,000 and they throw tomatoes at you, right? Most people are going to react however they're going to react. They're not going to react the way you think they're going to react is the thing, or as bad as you think they're going to react. So I would practice it. All right. And then what about turning over this sales hat eventually, right? Like, in other words, let's say you've got a high volume practice and you've got 2 treatment coordinators and they're really good at sales, do you have to sit and have this huge financial discussion with everybody? Not necessarily. Like, let's paint the scenario. Let's say it's you and a treatment coordinator when you start out, and you've gotten really good at this, and you're good at closing, and they're good at closing, and the practice is growing and growing, and things are going well, and now you've got a higher volume situation and a second treatment coordinator, and they're really good at closing cases. Well, then, yeah, you might turn it over a little bit earlier than you would have in the beginning because they've got the ball at that point, right? You just have to kind of use your judgment on this one. But you still have to be able to know how to do it and make sure that they're doing it properly so that, you're getting the expected results that you're hoping for. And the last 2 issues, these are just frequent questions I get about this when I talk about finances. What about phasing treatment? And again, I'm not weighing in a clinical capacity because I'm not a dentist. But if you're phasing treatment because it's a true financial barrier, that's one thing. If you're doing it because you told the person they need 6 crowns and, they go, well, what will insurance cover? And you go, well, they'll cover 2 this year. And they go, well, why can't we do 2 this year, 2 next year, and 2 the year after? And you go, okay, we'll do that. Well, there's a couple things you have to think about here. Number one, why tell the person they need 6 crowns and be willing to only do 2? Like, what message are you sending to that patient at that point? Because if I'm the patient, here's how I'm going to receive that. You just told me I needed 6 crowns. Let's say my insurance was going to cover $1,500 of it. And let's say your crowns are, I don't know, $1,200, right? So the whole treatment plan is $7,200. So I was supposed to pay the other $5,700. And then I asked you about the insurance, and then you immediately backed down, and now you're willing to let me do the 2 now. My first question would be, well, do I even need the other 4 crowns? Because you're fine on me waiting a year. And then I would question, do I even really need these 2? Because you were so quick to change your mind, right? So I would kind of stick to my guns. If you feel strong about, look, this is what you need, then that's where I would stick. If there's a true financial barrier where the person just absolutely can't afford it, that's one thing. If it's something where they just don't want to, well, who's the doctor? Right? Who's the doctor here? You're the doctor, so you have to decide what's best. Does that mean that you're not going to accept them as a patient? Look, that's up to you, right? But I probably would, but I would want to make sure they understand why I want to do these 6 right now, like why it is important. And I know some folks who are of the mind that, look, I'm not going to ignore active disease. We need to do this, right? So you have to have your own approach on this, but I wouldn't really phase stuff unless it's a true barrier the person cannot overcome. And you have to use your own clinical judgment on what you should and should not be doing. This is something I can't advise you on. Which brings me to the last question I get when I talk about this is, with a larger treatment plan with a new patient, should you present the whole plan up front? In other words, you've done your initial examination, you have the treatment plan together, and let's say it's big, you've never really met this person, or you met them for 20 minutes during the exam. Should you present the whole thing? Yes, assuming you have time to do it, yeah, present the whole thing. You might go, well, what if somebody gets upset with me? Okay, that may happen. Look, some people are just going to give you a hard time no matter what. The problem we run into is we tend to focus on those people giving us a hard time as opposed to you look at a group of 100 people and maybe, 5, 10 give you a hard time, the 90 don't. We should focus on the 90. Okay, 10 people give you a hard time. Some people are just going to do that. Some people are going to have problems with all kinds of stuff. But you got to be true to yourself here. So, if this is what the person needs, this is, again, my recommendation. I would tell them what they need. If you're not doing it because you're afraid they're going to react poorly, I think you're actually sending a worse message. And I think I've talked about this before, where it's almost like going, again, I'm not trying to compare auto repair to healthcare, but you go to a shop to get your car looked at, and they tell you, okay, we need to fix this, and you fix it. You come back to pick it up, and they go, oh, by the way, there's one other thing. You fix that, you go to pick it up, and they go, oh, by the way, there's one other thing. You would start to wonder, like, is this for real or what? Or are they just trying to rip me off? So, personally, if it were me as a patient, I would rather the doc tell me everything that's going on. Now, if I can't do it all right now, we can discuss that. That's a whole other thing, right? We could start with this or whatever, but I'd rather know everything that's going on up front. And like I said, some people are just going to give you a hard time. And just remember, you're not going to close everybody. And for some reason, people tend to get fixated on the one person they couldn't close. You're not going to close everybody. But if you put your mind to it and really get good at all the aspects of treatment presentation and financial discussions, you'll close a heck of a lot more than you're closing now. It'll get better bit by bit by bit. And the more wins you have doing it, the better you'll feel about it. And the cool thing about this is, if you really look at it from a kind of a big picture perspective, if I come to you and I need some minor restorative work plus 6 crowns, right? And that will fully restore my oral health. And maybe I don't want to pay all that money right now, but I realize it's something that I need to do. So I pay for this and you do my full treatment plan, and now I'm completely handled, right? I'm in great oral health and I'm coming for regular cleanings. Who won here? I won. I'm in excellent oral health. You won. You collected the practice, collected a little bit more money, cool. But also you won. You have professional satisfaction knowing that you actually did what you're there to do, right? You'll also notice I'm more apt to refer other people because you really care about and take care of people, you see? So it's really one of these things that not only do you win and the practice wins, but the patient wins. So anyway, I hope this helps. I have those links on the episode webpage. If you have any questions about MGE, you can call us at 800-640-1140 or find us online at mgeonline.com. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.